So our agenda tonight will be, we're going to do a quick acknowledgement of the land and then the tribes that we work with, introductions of the people attending tonight, a program overview of a class schedule of the whole program that we're going to do. And then tonight, we're going to focus on what is emergency management and how there's a local and a regional presentation of that. And then we're going to get into some basics that we're going to talk about as far as your preparations and what the public prepares for. And then finally, we're going to work on some contact information and some homework and some things like that that we'll hopefully take on to the next class. Okay, next, please. Our land acknowledgement. If you're comfortable, Jennelle, I'd love to read this. Dukes County Emergency Management recognizes and honors the many generations of the Wampanoag people who have lived and continue to be sustained in this territory for more than 10,000 years. We acknowledge Indigenous peoples as their traditional stewards of the land and their enduring relationship that exists between them and their traditional territories. The land on which we sit is the traditional territory of the Wampanoag Nation, and we thank them very much for the right to be here. My name is Russell Hartenstine. I am the emergency manager for West Tisbury. I have been that role for about 5 years. 5 years previous, I was the assistant emergency manager. And for 10 years previous to that, I was a volunteer firefighter. I hold a private role as an owner of a contracting business and a property management business. And between the two, I have worked on Martha's Vineyard for almost 30 years. With my roles over the past 30 years in emergency management specifically, I've become what we call the public information officer for the regional emergency management group. And I look forward to very much trying to promote public awareness and emergency management. And my second major role this year is to chair or vice chair the emergency management regional coordination group. I'd like to introduce the assistant tonight to our program. Her name is Jennelle Gadowski. She is my deputy in West Tisbury. Jennelle, would you like to say hello?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. As Russ said, my name is Jennelle Gadowski. My pronouns are she, her, and I am West Tisbury's Deputy Emergency Management Director. I'm the secretary for the Regional Dukes County Emergency Management. I also work administratively at the Bluffs Fire-EMS department and help with the public information. I'd like to introduce our chair and Bluffs Emergency Management Director.
That's me. Only in this picture, I look like my dad, which is kind of scary. My name is Nelson Wirtz, and I'm the Fire-EMS chief for the town of Oak Bluffs. I'm also a paramedic. In this role here, I am the Oak Bluffs Emergency Management Director, as well as the chair for the Dukes County Emergency Management. And I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank Russ and Jennelle for putting this program together and bringing some awareness of the needs of the emergency management community to this community. So thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Real quickly, why don't we go around the room and get some introductions going? I'll start by picking somebody that I don't know, and hopefully that person can introduce themselves, give them a little bit about why they're here, and then look to somebody else they don't know and introduce that way, and we'll go around hopefully quickly that way. Thank you so much. Let's see, Sean, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, sir, but maybe you can.
Sure. My name's Sean Udork. That's how you pronounce it. I'm coming from Cuttyhunk. We're longtime visitors there, recently bought a house there. So spending the warmer months in Cuttyhunk. I live in New Hampshire otherwise. I've been a volunteer firefighter up here for about 5 years and started helping out Seth Garfield and the rest of the fire service on Cuttyhunk. I'm a primary care doctor when I'm working, and that's me.
Thank you. Can you pick somebody in the group? All right, I will. I'm not afraid. Leo, how can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name's Leah Fermini. I work at Point B Realty in Edgartown. I've been on the island about 12 years now, and I volunteer with Edgartown Council on Aging, the Edgartown Board of Trade, and the Martha's Vineyard Striped Bass and Bluefish Derby. So I'm always happy to hear strategies like this in case anything happens, and I'm happy to pitch in and lend a hand.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Jenny Gadowski.
Hi, I'm Jenny Gadowski, West Tisbury. Russ and I have worked together many times in the past. I went to the first introduction meeting last week and decided to come again this week because I invited a lot of people and was hoping to see them here tonight. Former firefighter and EMT, and was very much part of emergency management many years ago and want to get back involved. Thank you for putting on the class.
Thanks, Jane. You want to pick somebody?
Sure, if I could, let me look at the list. I can't see the names anymore. Kevin Brennan,
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Brennan. Lived on the island for 6 years now in OB Fire-EMS. And in my prior life, Bergen County, New Jersey, OEM for about 20 years, Office of Emergency Management, different title, similar role, where I did mass casualty coordination, sheltering, and pretty much all the same stuff, just in a much different environment. Bergen County is about 850,000 people.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for bringing your experience here. You want to pick somebody in the group?
Grace!
Thanks, Kevin.
Don't be shy, nothing here.
My name is Grace Robinson, and I am a ESP, Education Support Professional at the Bluffs School. I work with kids with severe to mild disabilities, also typical kids. I am also an EMT for the Bluffs Fire Department. And I just enjoy volunteering, but a while back, I was a part of emergency management under Chief Rose. I don't know if it's the same program, but we did go to Bluffs School, pull everything out the closet, practice the setup. And I actually liked being a part of that. So I just wanted to get back involved.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's great.
I'm sorry, you want me to pick someone? Sorry, hold on. I can't see the. Nicola Blake, is that it?
Yeah, Nicola Blake, she, her. I've been on Martha's Vineyard. I bought a house here in 2012, West Tisbury. And I heard about this through I'm a member of the West Tisbury Energy Committee. I'm a retired environmental scientist, so it's very much close to my heart, climate change and all the disruptions that are going with it. And I'm also part of the team that are working on the climate action plan. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you.
And Pat, who hasn't been, I see Pat here, or who I don't know. Thanks.
Pat, you want to say hi?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, you are Pat Blake.
I'm Pat Baki.
Baki, sorry, yes. Could you say hi for us? Introduce yourself.
Hi. I received a notice from Maris Keating at the Anchors about this program, and with the rumblings of war in the Ukraine and Russia and possibly Europe, and oh my gosh, it looks like the United States could easily get sucked into this. I'm just interested. I have a family here on the vineyard. I have grandchildren, and I'm concerned about their future.
Okay.
So the more educated I can become as far as what steps a senior lady like me living alone can take to, well, just to better prepare for an emergency of any kind.
Great.
And I
Well,
thank you. I thank you for presenting this program.
yeah, you're welcome. First, this is a great group. Jenny, you were here last week. So she presents something of an interesting conundrum here where she can tell us how we did from the last class to this class. So I'm really excited about that input later on, Jenny. The rest of you come from varied backgrounds, which I'm really thankful for. And so many of you are already interested in volunteering or have been in the emergency services. I think this is going to be somewhat of a rehash, but also maybe a different eye opener for you. So I'm really excited to work with you. I hope that you continue to come to the next series of classes and that we can all do this together as best we can. If you can't, by the way, do any of the practicals that are in person, I'll figure out a way to do it Zoom too. So Sean, you sounded like you might not be around, but we'll try to make this work for everybody, because between the 8 or 9 that we had the last class plus the 9 that we see here, we might actually have a really fun and invigorating second round. So thank you very much. Thank you all. Next slide. Okay, so what does it mean? What are we doing here? So tonight, like I said, we're going to do an introduction and an introduction to the emergency management system on Martha's Vineyard and ways that we both work together during those scenes. The next class that we'll do is called a practical, and that's on Saturday, the 26th. What I'm proposing then we do is I'm going to train you a little bit more on how to prepare. This whole class is about how to prepare. And I want to take it from what you can do from a person, then take it from what you can do for your family, then take it to another level of what you can do for your house, and then your community, and finally ways to try to convince you to even volunteer more, because some of you just have so much time to boot. So the point of this is to get you resilient, strong, informed, and then you can get out there and activate for the community. And I really hope that we get a great perspective of all that. So what do we do? So the practical on Saturday would be taking what we kind of talk about today, and then I'm going to ask you to come and meet with me, where I'm going to show you a couple of different go bags, emergency situations where if you had to evacuate, one that you might want to put in your car and another one you might want to stash in your house for your family. What do those look like? I'll show you, and then maybe we can put some things together with there. The second thing that I'd like to do is have you sign up for something called Code Red, our emergency alert system, but also have you help come up with communication networks for your family. And we'll discuss how in emergency situations, it's really important to have a contact and an emergency plan for yourself. So the practical will all be about evacuation. And then what we'll do the next month, we're going to do one series of classes a month. So the first month is introduction, and introduction means, since you know nothing, evacuate, get out. Okay, now we got that covered. Now let's talk about the second side, which is ways to prepare. In ways to prepare, we're going to communicate and talk to you about something called sheltering in place, which is a fundamental principle for those that need to understand how to be ready for emergency disasters in their homes. Sheltering in place means how much water do you have? Food, supplies. Have you thought about it? Have you practiced it? What does it mean to practice it? So in the classes there, I want to bring up a couple of scenarios, talk to you about the disasters that we have, and then specifically get into the nitty-gritty about how you will make yourself even more resilient for your family and how you will create a resilient home so that you can stay and shelter in place. We'll do a practical on a review of a home that is resilient, and we'll discuss basically how that home became resilient and what makes it resilient. There's lots of things to talk about there. So hopefully we'll do a walk around and have a good stimulated conversation that way in person. And then finally, the last series of classes in the last month, every one of these, by the way, will be every 2 weeks or so. The last class is in May, and those will be based on ways to volunteer. And I'm very excited to say that we're actually working with the Climate Week and the Martha's Vineyard Commission a little bit to try to tie that together, because we see one of the main goals in the climate studies that we're having is volunteerism, and community resources is a must. So anyway, ways to volunteer. We're going to invite Salvation Army. We're going to invite Red Cross. We're going to talk about people that are out there that are doing things, what their roles are, what equipment they have, how maybe they might need more help, and where you could be to do it. And the idea is that if you see a role there that you might fill, let's go for it. And so how do we complete all this? The last class will be a shelter drill, so to speak, where we'll set up at the Oak Bluffs School a regional shelter. And anybody who wants to volunteer for a new group will have an opportunity to sign up with the people that they got to meet in the last class. I hope that that's going to be a really fun culmination of all the work that we've done here and make us all feel a little bit more secure about working together and working on a regional level to really promote emergency awareness. So with that, next slide. Okay, I have to get something adjusted, sorry. What is emergency management? So for Martha's Vineyard, as we all know, we have many towns and a couple of different islands. So we have a bifabricated system here. It's independent for each town to run itself. It's independent for each tribe to run itself. It's independent for all sorts of reasons. And that makes it incredibly difficult here. So on emergency management, we have a regional group, which we call the Dukes County Regional Emergency Managers Group. And we're a coalition of emergency management directors, medical services, fire services, law enforcement, healthcare, public and private works, lots of community partners. And together we help prepare, respond, and recover from emergency and disasters within Dukes County as a whole. Each emergency manager is autonomous, but as a group, we work together and we become a whole lot stronger when we need the support. So how does that work exactly during an implementation? You all know that we have boards of selectmen in our towns, and boards of selectmen are more advisors in emergency situations than actual anything else. They trust their fire departments, their police departments, and their emergency management to run the situation essentially for them. And so they elect or represent or find good representation in their departments, and that's what their job is. Then the next thing falls upon the emergency managers to work with those fire departments, police departments, to come up with cohesive plans. And we meet with what's called the REPC, the Regional Emergency Planning Committee. And the REPC works out all the different kind of regional plans that we're going to talk about in the future. I'll skip it for now, but that's the REPC. That's the work that gets done ahead of time. And then when it actually happens, we have the emergency system go into effect. And that's broken down into a couple of different things. The list that you see below are all the public, I should say this, the ones that the volunteers can supply. This is not the fire department. This is not the police department. Those departments are going to be incredibly busy during natural disasters doing a host of other things. It's going to be these volunteer organizations that are really being able to concentrate on the support of an emergency or a disaster. So what are those organizations? There's a couple that we have real strong on the island, and they're in the middle of this group. You see it right there, the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army, their job primarily is food provision and spiritual care. You have the Red Cross, which we see a lot of, promoting shelter setups, shelter registration, shelter management, but also help and support after fires and also doing blood drives. We have two other organizations that are woefully in need of support. One is almost defunct. The first one that's kind of running itself without anybody there is called MV DART. And that's a volunteer organization that helps with the incorporation of animals. DART stands for Disaster Animal Response Team, Martha's Vineyard DART. And the DART team is helpful because required by law for shelters, we must take animals if people come with them. Well, they found out that in past storms that if people do not bring they don't want to come without their animals. And so we are supposed to allow their animals in the shelters. So we have an organization supposedly trained to be able to help manage the animals that come. And on the other side of the shelters, we have a team of people, a medical reserve corps that's really suffering right now and needs help too and more support. And they're more trained from medical reserve people who can help in the backup support of our healthcare system. And so these were, for example, in our last shelter that we had, I had a doctor from the Medical Reserve Corps there for a couple hours to make sure that if we had anybody coming to be input, they could be checked out and serviced. We don't want to rely on the emergency services while they're running around taking care of the acute problems. We want more of something that's going to help us sustain the shelters. And that's why we use the Medical Reserve Corps. And we have a host of volunteers there. Next slide, please. All right, so I just described before, we're a regional emergency management group, and I just wanted to briefly show you all the different towns and where we go from there. In Aquina, we have Forrest Fuller as the emergency manager. In Chomark, his name, Timothy Carroll. One quick thing about all of our emergency managers, providing a couple here. Well, no, they're all part-time emergency managers with other full-time jobs. Some are full-time town employees, and others are just volunteers who get stipends, such as myself. I own and run a company 40 hours a week to 60 or whatever it is. I have 8 employees and my own responsibilities, but I've also stepped up as an emergency manager, and I probably do about 10 to 15 hours a week of work on emergency management alone as a stipend employee for about $25,000 a year. In other towns, they've structured it differently. West Tisbury, my town, believes that emergency management is a role played in the background, planning. I'm not a fire chief. I am not anything more than a planner and a well-trained person to be able to help put shelters together and other plans. But in other towns, they've combined the emergency manager with the fire department, such as Chief Wirtz. Chief, would you like to describe how you work your role as emergency manager as well as the fire department?
Well, like you were saying, Russ, emergency management is primarily in planning. And so as the fire chief, being able to plan and set up regional plans, understanding the work of shelters and the other volunteers, Red Cross, et cetera, and how they are incorporated into the emergency plans. That helps me as a fire chief, because during disasters, my responsibility is to run my department. And so when we have emergency plans set up, that makes my life a lot easier during an emergency, because we can just follow the plan, and I can continue to do my job and my responsibilities while the plan is being followed. And that's similar to the other chiefs that are also involved in emergency management as well.
Yeah. So we have towns like Eggertown that follows the Oak Bluffs model, as well as Vineyard Haven. I think that's about it. Yeah, Forrest, he's a part-timer like me in a couple of different directions. He has a background in construction, as well as does a lot of work in the police department. And then we have in Gosnold, Chief Seth Garfield. He's also in the fire department. So you can see, 90 times out of 10, when I, Russ Hartenstine, go to emergency management meetings and different trainings, 9 times out of 10, I'm with fire chiefs, because it's always lumped in with that. And then we always have this really great conversation about like what happens while, you know, some people are busy and what other happens. And the cool thing with the way we work regionally is I'm kind of free to help in emergency situations while some aren't. So while we have planners, we can also be advisors, or we can also just be watchers. And that means there's an awful lot of oversight that can happen without any major input. And that's, again, we all work together, and I'm very thankful for that. Next slide, please. So who do we also work with this regional group? This is almost the complete list that I could bore you with, but there's some pretty good important ones to call out. We work really well and often with the boards of health, as in COVID and a lot of stuff. We'll talk about that quickly. We also work with the sheriff's office with communication. They're a really big part, especially with disasters. When I go down this list, I see people like Eversource, or communities like, or community resources like Eversource, and they have relations with us that they supply during storms, from anything from people to contact immediately during a storm to follow through, as well as preparations. And they'll let us know how many people are coming to support in advance of storms. We work alongside of the Martha's Vineyard Hospital, and they attend almost every monthly meeting that we have. And we're always kind of trying to put our plans together with their plans. We work with the Steamship Authority. We work with the tribes. We try to work with everybody, because everybody's part of emergency management. And it's really kind of an interesting job that we are really great liaisons. And the more we're out there, the more successful we are. Next slide. One of the things, this is a perfect segue. One of the things is liaisons the emergency managers do. One of the roles that I hold currently is Regional Emergency Management Public Information Officer. And the Public Information Office is sort of the spokesperson, but also the sort of the voice box, as it were, of the informational part of emergency management. And so what does that mean? We're out there trying to promote press releases. We're out there trying to promote videos. We're out there trying to promote emergency management releases. Now that can be from emergency code red type alerts, to press releases about upcoming storms, to website updates or social media presences. We work really hard on a bilingual communication method, where we try to constantly translate everything into at least Portuguese to understand that there's many different cultures on the island, and not one language sorts the whole mess out. So the Public Information Office works really hard to try to get those plans communicated to the public and that the public feels secure about what they're doing. I guess that's why I'm here right now. Next slide. All right, so one of the things we think about in planning, it's so fascinating is, and Jenny, thank you very much for helping us update this one, is we have a year-round population of estimated around 20,000. That's not that much compared to what we have in the summer, which is a seasonal population of almost 100,000 in August. What that means to us is an incredible stress of a local infrastructure. Year-round population, we're already desperate with 20,000 people in the wintertime to have volunteers help staff a shelter for 20,000 people. And our shelter only holds 300 at the largest amount, 300. And if suddenly we have a seasonal population of 100 who do not evacuate, who do not heed any lessening causes of a hurricane upcoming in 48 hours, and are suddenly stuck here when everything is jam-packed and we can't go, what happens when we have 100,000 people when we only have a shelter worth 300 and not enough volunteers? We have a huge resource that could possibly be needed, and we have very little access to that right now. And what that means is we really have to dig deep and look at our neighbors and look at ourselves and find more time for everybody, because we might need it someday. Next slide. One of the other roles that we wanted to talk about briefly is our role with public health and how we work in emergency management and public health. So before COVID, I had trained an awful lot with boards of health on things like influenza clinics and making sure that we did vaccination clinics. COVID completely changed our perspective of how to handle emergency management and how to handle outbreaks of disease. But obviously that has been for the past several years, one of our major roles is to help realize what those plans are, modernize those plans, and work with Board of Health to implement them. It's been a great stress for us all, and it's been one of the most challenging parts of my life. Other things that we work with public health, we do emergency water planning, food, health, supplies, making sure, again, the public health and safety is there. We provide public information. We heard about that before. And then finally, training with public health. We'll hopefully get back to those influenza clinics and other things like that, where we can do more public health outreach. And we work a lot with the public health nurses. So again, to briefly describe some of the things that we did for COVID response, since this is a good idea of description. With Public Information Office, for the first several months, we worked very hard on trying to come up with videos in both languages on how to wash, how to everything. As we learned how to deal with COVID, public information was there the entire way. And I can't thank the radio and the press and Facebook and Islanders Talk and all of those things for helping spread all of the different messages from Board of Health. And we worked really hard to promote what the Board of Health said. Next things we work on a lot with the health is safety measures. We work with stay-at-home masks, all that. Community vaccination is another thing that we talked about that we also do. And we really work hard on providing as much vaccination information as possible. And then the other thing that we worked really hard with COVID that we didn't realize was going to be a great role was working with MEMA, which is the Massachusetts Emergency Management Association. And we were able to procure thousands of masks, sanitizers, and all that PPE equipment that was so hardly fought. Emergency management was able to come up with a lot of that over times when it was really needed. And we gave back supplies to the hospital when they were short, resupplied for our shelters, and then found out that was really needed when the schools opened up again. Anytime we were there, we actually had some plans in place immediate with just amazing response. And I was very proud to be part of that. So again, more about how do we prepare? We have two different kinds of preparations that we're going to talk about tonight. There's the public part, which is emergency managers, the town's role. What is the public doing for you to prepare? The second thing that we're going to talk about briefly is about the private responsibilities, or what citizens need to be understanding and responsible for. There's a connection there. As John F. Kennedy said, that's not what you can do for the country, but what is it? I can never do this right. But he had the point right, which is we have to help each other out, and we can't just look for somebody to come to us. We have to be ready for them, and we have to be ready to help others. Next slide. So real briefly about emergencies and types of things that we have to prepare for. We'll talk about this later on, but again, just to get a general perspective, we have blizzards, hurricanes, wildfires, public health, human-made disasters that could be spills or other things. We've had airplane crashes, so boat accidents, power outages, road closures. Martha's Vineyard is a wonderful symposium of all of these things. Next slide, please. When you look at America real quickly on this map, you can see that they've broken it down. This is from the Red Cross. And I really like this because it shows you kind of target areas built by color, but it doesn't really describe us very well. This tiny little dot that you can hardly see between Connecticut and Rhode Island and Massachusetts on the right-hand side. You see Martha's Vineyard over there in blue, you guys? So this is the thing. In blue, it says hurricanes. That's all we got to be worried about on Martha's Vineyard. But that's by far the furthest thing I've ever thought about, because we have wildfire issues on Martha's Vineyard. We've had tornado warnings recently on Martha's Vineyard. We're an island. Oh my God, could we have a tsunami? Do we have flooding? Okay, we can skip volcanoes. I'm not going to talk about meteors, but realistically, we have some of the largest, categorically most dangerous and devastating issues that could happen. And I underline could, because when we talk about hurricanes, we talk about once in 100-year storms. Well, we haven't had a 100-year storm in over 100 years or 70 years or this. We think of things that come in rotational basis that will happen, but we don't know when. And so as an emergency manager, when I look at this map, I think, oh my God, Martha's Vineyard has almost every issue the entire country has. And therefore we have to learn an awful lot. We have to work an awful lot. We have to prepare for an awful lot. Next slide. So what does preparation mean? How does planning happen? What is the integration method and thought ideology? This diagram here kind of tries to show you that. If you start on the top left where it says mitigation, that's kind of where we just discussed. We talked about public education, hazards and vulnerabilities assessments, and improved infrastructure. That's where we start. That's where we understand where our problems are and we see where we need to go. Then we're going to educate the people. Then we're going to work hard to get it. And then what's the next step? Once we start conglomerating that information, working together, we go into planning and preparedness. We agree, we can move forward. And therefore you get emergency response plans, you get continuity of operations, which is essential for government. You get training, you get exercises, and you get that emergency alert system. So now we have that idea of how we're working together and planning. And then we go into the response. When chief puts his hat on from fire department to emergency or emergency management to fire department, that's the switch. He's ready to go. He's going to respond to life safety, property preservation, incident stabilization, and evacuation and shelters. And hopefully that's when Russ will be back and them up. Recovery is when we're going to look around. And again, we plan for recovery. We think about this. We don't just wake up one day and go, the storm is gone. We're there for plowing. We're there for cleanup. And we thought about it before it's happened, and we're trying to get ready for it while it's happening. Recovery then goes back into mitigation because we look at what we did right, what we did wrong. We go back to public education. We go back to improved infrastructure. And this circle spins as long as we all work together and we all realize that we all have a greater goal beyond. It will never stop. And it's kind of with climate change, getting more and more frequent with larger and larger impact. And so we have more and more to do. Next slide. So public preparations, planning. We have just finished up a large scale wildfire plan on the vineyard. We work on shelter plans. We work on something called mass feeding plans. What are they? If you were to lose Kronig's and everything else in power for a while, we're going to have Salvation Army and MEMA and FEMA and a bunch of other people come fly in. And then we have plans ready to have people circulate around, get their food, and go home. We have evacuation plans. We have staging. We have everything kind of ready, but we don't have everybody knowledgeable about how it works. And again, that's when the Public Information Office comes into play, because anything that we didn't do ahead of time, which we should have done, we're going to try to catch up with public information. We train, we plan, we work with emergency services and volunteer organizations. And the more we train and the more we plan, the more we find out where we're weak, the more we get stronger, and the more we practice. We do with monthly meetings with the Regional Emergency Planning Committee. And every month, as a town, we all come together and we at least discuss on a monthly basis what we're planning and what we're working towards. We have the Public Information Office, always trying to improve the communications. We have shelters. We're working on our disaster plans for shelters. We have different types of shelters. We have major shelters that you sleep in for weeks. We could have a shelter that we open up for a night for warming, or a shelter that we might open up for a day for cooling. I host those quite a bit these days in the library, and we've become pretty experienced about hosting those. We also work in our preparations for grants and finding funding for all this infrastructure stuff that we need. We all work for more equipment, and we try to promote and support the fire department and the police department with more equipment. And then here we are again, recruiting volunteers, trying to find more people to infrastructure support. And what does that mean? Let's go to the private preparations. So first thing, you can't volunteer unless you're ready. The fundamental point of tonight is you have to make yourself independent and strong before you can help others. And there are a lot of ways that we can work on that are very simple, that can get you very independent and very motivated to help other people in a very short amount of time. But it takes certain things, and it takes critical thought, and it takes honest to goodness, not just, well, the first one, stock up on supplies. Don't just grab a can of beans and expect it to be there, and 6 years later it's rotten. There's a lot of stocking up of supplies people think they do, but logically thinking about it, checklists, do you actually go through it? Are you actually preparing and reviewing? Sheltering in place. That's again a very, very important point we'll talk about in the next classes. Learning to shelter in place means basically to learning to survive in your own home during a storm, because 9 times out of 10 we're not going to be able to fit everybody into a shelter if we open one up ahead of time. And we're really hoping that the public is as durable as possible so that we can get to those in need as quickly as possible. Learning to shelter in place should be one of the most primary things a citizen can do to help their town. Now, what does that mean? Fortifying your home in as many different ways as possible, from putting your furniture away so it doesn't become dangerous to you, to making sure you have water after the storm in case you have no power, no heat, no water. Making sure your home is satisfied for the need at hand. One of the things I thought about a lot this past fall is we lost power unexpectedly in West Tisbury for 3.5 days from a windstorm. And it was a good windstorm. But the thankful thing I thought about was it was not freezing. If it had been a blizzard, we lost power for 3.5 days. So many people who were getting by without heat would have been really severely compromised. And that scared me to death. So we also asked the public to volunteer in government and local organizations. I think a lot of people think of volunteering as like Salvation Army or Red Cross, or I'm going to be an EMT. But I also want to drive home the point that working in your town or volunteering as a select person or committee in your government is so fundamentally important to preparing your town for emergency management. A strong local government is key to being able to respond and foresee on an organizational level all the incidents that we're going to deal with. So even if you don't think that you have a role there, like when I was talking to the doctor at the shelter, he didn't realize that he could maybe run for the Board of Health because he was bored. He wasn't able to actively use his medicine training enough on the level that he was volunteering for. So I asked him to step up a little bit more, and he's considering maybe running for the Board of Health or working with the Board of Health. But there's so many different ways that we can do this kind of volunteerism in our local government. I cannot suggest it enough. Think about it. And as a friend of mine said, yes, you do have to sit there and listen to other people, but it's actually a good thing. I encourage it, and I don't do enough of it. Last thing, yep, Chief, put that on speed. Anyway, the last thing there is join what we're going to try to culminate when we talk about volunteer services. We do not have on the island a very strong thing called the CERT, Citizens Emergency Response Team. There's one CERT on the island right now, and that's in Aquina, the smallest town on the island. Well, I can't say that. Well, anyway, that's close enough. Yeah, on the island. So the long thing is the CERT there was identified because Aquina found itself as an isolated town in case of major storms. They have one road in, and they realized that if that was a problem, they couldn't help. There wasn't enough fire and police to be able to help their community. So they pulled together as many people as they could with as many different backgrounds, and they've been training on everything from reaching out to communities, neighbors, to training in first aid, to getting chainsaw lists together, whatever it could be to make sure that their town could respond as effectively as possible on a community level. We hope by the end of the culmination of this class that a lot of us look around in a room and find people that want to start certs in Oak Bluffs, in West Tisbury, everywhere. The more certs we have, the more of an active volunteer army we will have. And I think that's what our real goal is here today. Thanks. Next one. Okay, so briefly, this is one of the things I want to show you, but we'll talk about this more in detail in the next class, is ways of being more resilient as a private person in your life. And so here we have an emergency preparedness kit. This is a great example of what you can have in your home. This will protect you and your family for what you can use. I have all this on backup, by the way, and we can spread all this out. So when I come to meet with you, I will bring all of these and you can have them. We'll look at all this together and you can always have this background for you. So anyway, we're talking about bottled water, canned goods and non-perishable foods, manual can openers, radios with battery or cranks, cell phones, but you got to have a way of charging them up. I have a lot of backup chargers for my office, and I can plug a charger up into my Wi-Fi. If I lose power, I don't actually lose Wi-Fi. So having battery backup is really convenient these days. There's lots of portable ways of doing that. You want to make sure with emergency preparedness, you've thought about your medications. Because if you get in a harmful place that you cannot take care of yourself, you become somebody that needs to be taken care of. Also, that means maybe having a first aid kit. So maybe even if you can't use it, somebody else can. And please make sure it's up to date and not ancient. Diapers, wipes, baby food, formula. Small kit, even if you don't have one, is helpful in an emergency if there's a real get out. But again, if you have a young family around or you're a grandparent, these are things you might want to think about having. Pet food, supplies, backups, tags, crates. I just have a Yorkshire Terrier puppy, 6 months old. We have the crates, we have the tags, we have the licenses. I don't want to lose this beautiful creature in an emergency. Passports, copies of your documents. I encourage you all not only to have them, but find a way of encrypting them and backing them up some way in case you lose them. Again, emergencies, whistle in case of disaster for signaling for help. Sleeping bag. I carry a sleeping bag in my car off island because God knows if I'm stuck, I have a sleeping bag in my car. We'll talk about that again. Next one. Change of clothes. Always. You know, what would your mom say? Personal hygiene items, matches, and cash, money. So cash, money, real briefly on that one. Before we go to the next slide, it's important when you plan, not only to plan where you're going to go, but to have funds to be able to go there. That's an important thing that a lot of people don't really remember. Next slide. This is a cute little version of the other side of the form that we'll give you when you come, but it's for the kids because like anything, emergency preparedness can be taught at a very early level. You know, when I was a young kid, it's a horrifying thing to think about for the duck and cover. And somebody mentioned that they're concerned about the Ukraine. That was ingrained upon us when I was a child. And then my mother put that wonderful firefighter symbol on one of the windows when I was a child. And I remember learning how to, you know, be ready for that guy. We talked about that stuff. We talked about what fires might mean and how to get out of my house. I did that with my own children. I made sure they memorized my phone number before they could even barely talk. I wanted to make sure that in case any way, shape, or form we got apart, they would be able to find me. So that's really important. That's what we're going to talk about as those family trees and communication issues in person. But again, teaching your children is fundamental because having them act right is about training. It's not about improvising. And we all know how hard it is to train our children. So starting very early with some of this stuff is a good scenario. And so here's a really good picture of a happy bear being ready and showing all the different things that we talked about. And maybe with you and a group of your children, you can put these things together after we talk. Next slide. It's frozen. Oh. So it takes everybody to protect our community. Becoming a volunteer. We talked about it real quickly. You all are sort of volunteers. We're going to ask for more volunteerism, but that's where we're at. we need more. My goal was to finish between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. It's 7:21. I went a little faster, which is never very bad. But again, how do we do? Did we get all of that? Do we want to talk about any of these topics before I give you your homework?
I think that was good, Russ. Thank you. It was a good presentation.
Thanks. Well, Jennelle, thank you for making me look good. I appreciate it. Jenny, you saw I was rambling a lot more last time, and these slides help keep me on track. I appreciate it very much. Okay, so we'll do this then. The homework, since I don't want to kill anybody's time. What do I mean by homework? I'd like you all to please make sure that your family contact information in your phones is up to date. Okay, the primary. Think about as, again, the contacts you're going to want to think about and make sure you have. Who are you going to call in your family that's going to be able to call everybody else and let them know that you're safe, because you're not going to, your phone's going to be dying. You're going to make one phone call. So what you want to do is you want to have a phone tree kind of ready. We'll talk about that phone tree and I'm going to ask you to put it together. But the phone tree goes like this. You're going to delegate one person in your family, your brother, your best friend, who cares? I don't know. But that person's going to be that contact for you, and they're going to get a call from you, and they're going to know who to call from there. You put that list together, you email that list to them, and then they can help you take care of your family to not worry. It's a fundamental goal in stress and in disasters to reduce stress. You want to make sure that you're not a burden. That's a big factor, and making sure people are taken care of and all of that. So communication is key. So update that contact list so that we can put that together with you and look constructively about how we do that. I'll offer examples in the next class. The second thing I'd like you to think about a little bit more is once you do that contact information, say we've had a hurricane and you are fit and willing to be able to help somebody with a chainsaw, or fit and willing to go over with a first aid kit and check your neighbors because you know nobody else can. I would like you to start to think a little bit about some of your neighbors and put together a possible list of people you want to call. And then I want to talk to you a little bit more about that and how we can really start to develop communication trees and neighborhood trees. I want to ask you to be advocates in your neighborhoods, to become an outreach coordinator in a way and help them coordinate. And then the final thing is I'd like to ask you, we just kind of really briefly went all of that shelter stuff and evacuation stuff, but for your own selves, envision yourself over the next week or so, what it would be like to have to evacuate and what things that you hold dear. What would it be like if you've lost 90% of your life and you're stuck somewhere with a bunch of strangers in a room? I ask you to really think about it, because I don't think many of us have. And it's kind of scary to think about it. So I just want us to think about it before I ask you to really talk about it with me next month or next couple weeks for now. I guess this is the time I'm supposed to say questions, comments, and concerns. Okay, usually no response means I didn't do my job. Nobody's got anything. I didn't make anybody upset. Jenny, thank you.
I would like to compliment you on tonight's performance. It was absolutely well put together, well presented, clear and concise. Excellent. It has given me a dozen ideas to discuss with you at the next meeting, and suggestions of things that I've done in the past with some of your slides. But I thought this was very well presented. And I would still encourage each and every one of the 9 or 10 people that were present tonight to try to invite 1 or 2 people to join us. It's never too late. And even if they can't make all the meetings, we can get names and pass out all these wonderful slides that you're going to print for us. And there's never too many in this family called Martha's Vineyard that's going to work together to save ourselves and our neighbors. And thank you so much for putting this together. And Jennelle, thank you very much for the slides. They're excellent.
Yeah, they really are. Yeah, well, thanks, Jen. It's a really great honor. I think the class, we can always get more people. The cool thing about volunteering is you can always join in, at any time. But what level do you want to join in? That's the greatest question. When I first joined the fire department, it was when I just gotten married. I was living very close to the state forest in West Tisbury, like at the end of, oh gosh, I can Oak Lane. And I was so close to the state forest, I could smell it. And I would walk it quite often and I could smell the burning timbers there in my head. And I said to myself, I need to know more about this so that I can protect my family. That led to me becoming more conscious of the neighborhood around me. And then that ended up lending me to the fire department through a bunch of different ways. But I think it's about trying to be more in touch with your surroundings. And that's what, what we're supposed to be. Yeah, so please invite more people if you think this was cool. Bring anybody you want. Now that we don't have so many restrictions, we should be able to meet in person and really enjoy this. And I hope for a couple of hours we won't bore each other and really come up with ways we can be more prepared, more resilient. So with that, next class will be Saturday, March 26th. We're gonna do it in the morning. It's a Saturday, so it's 9 to 11. You can get on with your day after the class. It'll be at the Public Safety Building, which is in West Tisbury, across from Kronig's. And that's basically, there's a big room there that we can use to congregate. And I'll be very happy to show you our fire trucks afterwards if you like.
Thank you, Russ.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rob.
Have a
Thank
have a
you.
good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.